Hello and welcome. Today I want to talk about Uriah Heep, a band that is often cited as one of the most underrated rock bands in the West, and as I read, especially in the US. But for me, this is not the case at all. Because coming from the East, I grew up thinking that everyone knew this band as they were extra huge in my country. So when I moved to Europe, I was kind of shocked because I never heard them on the radio. No one really talked about them, and even when I was on some flea markets or music shops, I do not remember seeing lots of vinyls with them or some CDs, and it just felt really strange to me because they are very cool. But I guess part of the reason why they were so huge in post-Soviet countries is because during the Soviet era, access to Western music was very limited, I would say almost banned, and music could only be heard through certain programs on specific days and times. And in my country, one of these programs was called Morning Post, and it played Western music only on Mondays at 9:45, and because of all of these limitations, bands like the Rolling Stones or Led Zeppelin didn't get much airplay because they were seen as too political and too social. But songs like July Morning and Lady in Black by Uriah Heep were played a lot. And the second reason why they're so huge is because after the collapse of the Soviet Union, Uriah Heep became one of the first Western rock bands to tour extensively in post-Soviet countries, and even today, while many bands skip this region, Uriah Heep still plays there. So while in the West they are often seen as just another classic rock band, in the former Soviet Union countries they remain one of the most beloved names of the golden era of rock, and that's why I want to share my love to this band with you, starting with their first album. Uriah Heep's debut album Very Eavy, Very Umble was released in 1970s. The band's lineup during the recording progress was quite unstable, especially when it comes to the drummer. The core members who would go on to define Uriah Heep were David Byron, vocals. One of the key elements that made Uriah Heep stand out from other rock bands was the unmistakable voice of David Byron. His voice became an essential part of the band's identity. Mick Boggs, guitar. Boggs' ability to blend blues, rock and a bit of metal into the band's early tracks gave them a distinctive edge. Paul Newton, bass. His bass line on the debut album helped shape the overall sound of the band. But when it comes to drums, things were messy. Alex Napier recorded most of the album but was fired shortly. Kite Baker played on a few tracks but left so quickly that his name wasn't even listed in the credits. Nigel Olsson, best known as Elton John's drummer, briefly joined after the record was finished but didn't stick around for long. And it wasn't just the drumming position that was unstable. At first, the band didn't even have a dedicated keyboard player. Ken Hensley joined Uriah Heep near the end of the recording progress, adding keyboards and additional guitar parts on top of already finished material. And after the album was released, it wasn't widely recognized and actually received some very harsh criticism. And there is a famous story about a journalist who, in her review, compared Uriah Heep to Jethro Tull, claiming that they failed to create something original. And she wrote that if this album or this band would ever become popular, she will commit suicide. So I really wonder where is this woman right now. The cover of Very Eavy, Very Umble features David Byron wrapped in a spider web, a rather unusual concept for a debut album cover, and one that certainly helped set Uriah Heep apart from many other bands at that time. The album kicks off with the song Gypsy, which quickly became the band's signature track. This was the first track they recorded and it already solidified their sound, heavy riffs combined with powerful keys. Walking in Your Shadow features another heavy riff, leaning more into classic blues rock. Come Away Melinda is a tender ballad showcasing the more lyrical side of the band. Lucy Blues is a bluesy track that stands out from the rest of the album. The US version of the album replaced it with the heavier Bird of Prey song. Dreamer brings in some psychedelic rock vibes. Real Turn On also loud and exciting song. I Will Keep On Trying is a progressive track that blends powerful vocals with intensive instrumental arrangements. Wake Up, Set Your Signs, also a cool composition. It starts off as a heavy rock, then transitions into a jazzy atmosphere. As I said, Uriah Heep's debut album, Very Eavy, Very Umble, may not have been a commercial success at first, but its influence on the rock genre was undeniable, and in fact, Richie Blackmore from Deep Purple named Uriah Heep as one of his favorite bands in an interview with New Musical Express. And this is important because Deep Purple, with their own groundbreaking sound, was part of the same hard rock and early heavy metal movement that Uriah Heep helped create. And Blackmore's admiration for them says a lot about how much of an influence Uriah Heep had on shaping rock in the 70s and beyond. And Very Heavy, Very Humble really made the way for the heavier, more progressive rock that came after, leaving its mark not just on Deep Purple but also on bands like Judas Priest and Iron Maiden, who would go on to define the genre. And in one of the interviews, Uriah Heep revealed that their main motivation for starting the band wasn't the pursuit of fame or recognition. They simply had the desire to record music and release as many vinyls as possible. So they basically just wanted to create the music they loved without worrying too much about how it would be perceived. And this is exactly what this album is about. It is diverse, colorful, and full of different styles and moods. It sounds very interesting and unusual for a debut album, and despite the initial criticism, it was a crucial step in the band's evolution, and this album proved that Uriah Heep wasn't afraid to experiment, and while critics didn't favor it at the time, the album later became iconic with tracks like Gypsy and I Will Keep On Trying remaining classics to these days. And that's it for today. If you have any thoughts on why this band didn't receive proper recognition in the West, or you just want to share your opinion on the album, feel free to drop a comment. I'd really love to hear your thoughts.